Heat island effect video?
As you move through a city, you probably notice summer heat can be a lot worse depending on which neighborhood you're in. Take these two parts of Portland, Oregon, Lower Albina and Council Crest. They're about 3 miles apart. One neighborhood has lots of trees and a great view of downtown, while the other sits next to the interstate and gets up to 19 degrees hotter. This isn't exactly a coincidence. Many of the neighborhoods that get hit by the most extreme heat today can actually be traced back to racist city planning policies from nearly a century ago.
When we studied 108 cities across the country, we found a systematic pattern that
Anybody want to care to guess why there's extreme heat in redlined areas? Or why extreme heat is worse in redlined areas? It's a lack of green space. It's because in some of these redlined areas, there was not as much funding set aside for the urban design or landscape design elements, not as many tree-lined streets, not as much open green space policies, and lack of foliage. Yeah. And that does reduce, I don't know if they said that in the beginning. And it's not just trees either. Any vegetation that can help with offering green space, even in like grassy knoll areas, and compared to like concrete areas. The concrete is going to be a magnet to that heat. It's going to make the area more hot. It has a lot to do with concrete. Lots in Arizona. Well, some areas like in Arizona where it's just you're in a desert climate, you're in an arid or semi-arid environment, like it's not gonna make a difference. Grassy knoll. Not the grassy knoll. That's what they're called. That's literally what they're called. Lone Texan, thank you so much for the follow. Isn't New Mexico mostly desert? Yes. New Mexico is mostly high desert. High elevation desert area. No, I think you meant I did not mean the grassy knoll. We know what happened at the grassy knoll. I'm not talking about it. Did you have a cactus? So in a lot of areas, a lot of HOAs, require you to pluck the needles of a cactus. So you can have cactus, you can have cacti. They can be used. They can be used in your landscape design, but in a lot of places, and a lot of commercial areas as well, like you cannot have cacti needles. They are a hazard. Most of them are plucked. Just a fun fact. Holy years, thank you for the follow. Cacti needles are cool and good. Well, to answer your question, like, I did not have any cactus at my place. Like, there for a while, there was limitations to how much water you could use. And the house where I rented, in the neighborhood where I rented, they did not have any natural green. Like, there's no such thing as like natural lawns growing in Albuquerque, Mexico. So it's just a bunch of hardscape. So it's like it's rocks, it's gravel, there's sand, and then I had a tree, so I did have some irrigation for the tree and the shrubs, but for the most part, it's really expensive to, and it's quite a privilege to be able to have natural, not even natural green space, but manufactured green space in your lawns in Albuquerque. I still didn't answer your question though. No cacti. No cacti. I live right now in a very well-funded suburb, but the most redlined city to the south was super racistly laid out, so all the now cheaper stuff is surrounded by nothing but concrete. And to be fair, the way that I see things is that, like, understanding that 10 degrees in built environment makes all of the difference, but in terms of whether or not trees are the end-all be-all to accomplish social equity in these historically redlined districts is absolutely, it's absurd. It's asinine. Tree-lined paved roadways or medians or any type of green space should just be like the last-minute adornment on a dish. Like, this should be like, you know, the parsley. We need to make major changes to our built environment first, and then the add-on should be to include green space regulations that include the same amount of tree-lined parkways that you would see in your run-of-the-mill suburban neighborhood that has, you know, the incentive already to ensure that a certain percentage of all of the design in the roadway design includes, you know, some greenery. That's it. We're paying not for awful decisions in the past, like city planners using male tree varieties to not produce fruits. Congratulations on those 100k channel points. I think one of the reasons why city planners would have opted to go with a male variety plant is to eliminate the need for ongoing maintenance because resources are typically limited. Please give us channel point redeems. Okay. Trees and urban planning do not go together. Yes, they do. What? They absolutely do. You would be surprised. You'd be surprised. And like any adornment to an existing space in our built environment is from city planning. You can already see it's a concerted effort to decide which areas will have allocated green space. Some of these areas if the planning, if the comprehensive plan has been updated, might require a certain percentage of green space to any new development. The problem is that the incentive to include open or green space initiatives in these historically low-income communities is more so the issue than anything else. Can we at least get a gift sub to Stream Elements? Amy still didn't send the email after promising she would. OnlyFans went? Never. I am 100%, I am 110% committed to never giving you all an OnlyFans. Twitch and cumin don't mix? I feel like, what do you mean? Hold on for a minute. I feel like Twitch is the home of the Coomers who like to come out at night. Like to crawl out. They like to crawl out at night. What's a Coomer? What are you doing here? These are the vibes. You might be right, Amy. For what? What do you mean? Coomers do not own houses, we own holes. Aw, are there any Koomies? Listen, I accept Koomies with open arms, okay? It's only whenever Koomies ask those questions that are kind of awkward. So I just want to be clear. I meant like it's not a good thing to mix. It's a bunch of fun. Oh, okay. Thoughts on the Bella Thorne? We actually... Maybe don't say you accept Kumis with open arms. But okay. Coomer is literally a derogatory term made up by no-fap incels. Oh. Because, you know, clipping and shipping. Oh. I forget about that. Sick of all the terms. What is a gloomer? Hold on, what's a gloomer? Someone who's like doom and gloom? A gloomer is a baby doomer? Bloomer? That's cute. You can reclaim memes. Pepe has been rehabbed by constant leftist shit posting. It's great. Oh look, I'm in the business of reclaiming memes 100%. Incels seriously believe that I've done that before, but prior to the plague.
Redline communities were today, on average, about 7 degrees hotter than their non-redlined counterparts.
Redlining was the government-sanctioned effort from the 1930s to segregate communities of color by refusing to give them housing loans and insurance.
There were already lots of racial covenants that neighborhoods would basically say, we are not going to allow Negroes, I think was the language, Chinese, Japanese, Hindus, in these neighborhoods. And redlining kind of codified this, where now it was allowable.
The federal government rated housing desirability on 4 tiers. The lowest was graded D and colored red.
They were not provided green spaces, they weren't provided street trees, they weren't provided a lot of investments that many other neighborhoods received. And so a policy that had played out 80 years ago was affecting what you and I would experience in our neighborhoods today.
Maybe you've heard of the urban heat island effect, where cities are significantly hotter than surrounding areas. Urban areas with roadways, asphalt, and large buildings turn solar radiation into heat. These features absorb the heat from the sun during the day. In the evening, when temperatures are supposed to cool down, the retained heat is released back into the neighborhood. Redline neighborhoods were more likely to be slotted for freeways, while green-coated neighborhoods were more likely to be given parks. Here's what that means for cities like Portland. You can see hotspots near highways and pavement, while trees west of the river keep things cool. Portland was actually the most extreme example of all the cities studied.
These areas have not had any interventions to change the neighborhoods since that period.
One of those formerly redlined areas is Lower Albina, a historically black neighborhood. In the late 50s, the city of Portland flattened 30 acres from the neighborhood to make room for a stadium and parking lots. A few years later, the state bulldozed through the heart of the neighborhood to make way for the freeway, demolishing more than 300 homes. This led to a massive decline in what was once a thriving black community.
In Portland, because we don't have the Confederate history, we do have these monuments that engender the same kind of imposition of power that Southern Confederate monuments do, and the freeway is one of them, certainly I-5, and the other is the Memorial Coliseum. That's our Robert E. Lee statue.
This is Rukaya Adams. She grew up in the Albina neighborhood and chairs a nonprofit called Albina Vision, a group that's working to repair the damages done to the black community of Portland's Albina neighborhood. Albina Vision has proposed a plan to redevelop the area, lighting the interstate, building affordable housing, and pushing for large-scale urban green spaces to cool the city. Meanwhile, the Oregon Department of Transportation has proposed expanding the I-5 freeway further.
We do not agree with the direction it's going. We don't think that's the right way to heal the community and rebuild it. Because we were so intentional in destroying black communities, we must also be intentional in rebuilding them.
Lower Albina, like a lot of redline neighborhoods in Portland and elsewhere, has gentrified. Interstate construction decimated the population, but it's bounced back over the past few decades.
The discussion about Harriet Tubman Middle School and the safety of the air for kids is a major issue now. That even creates a point of tension, right? So as we talk about I-5 today, a lot of black folks are frustrated because they're basically saying environmentalists didn't care about the health of black children when it was all black, but now they care when their kids are there.
As climate change accelerates and we race to solve it, cities will continue to change exponentially. And with renewed calls for racial and environmental justice, solutions should include those who haven't had a say in the planning process.
It's a little easier more recently now that we're talking openly about systemic racism because we're beginning to identify the ways that it plays out in the urban form. I'm hoping that over time it will start to reflect a more equitable view of how we should all live in the city. But I just hope that by the time we get to that conversation, that neighborhoods aren't so gentrified, that there really are very few people of color, and the ones that remain there are the ones that are relatively privileged.
This was a common theme across most major cities in the United States during urban renewal, during the movement to make way for the car in most major cities. It just so happened that the major plans to reconstruct the built environment of a city were at the expense of black and brown communities who did not have the ability to fight back against this demolition, against this construction of the federal highway and other major roadways that would lead to the highway. Also, another reason why higher percentages of concrete in these low-income areas do make it hotter. It makes it hotter. It makes it hotter in the summer. I am a robot. And that's how that, this is how we see a common theme. It's not like a one-off thing, even though we have a case study here that's focusing specifically on Portland. The thing is that most cities have the same story. And that's why you can almost guarantee that this is a systemic issue. This was institutional racism. This was something a little bit more insidious. Whenever you start to look at how each of these cities have a very similar theme to them, and they all ended the same, and they all have the same outcomes: environmental racism, the effect of higher temperatures, the effect of poor education, the school to prison pipeline. All of these things go into the historical nature of these housing policies that were outright racist. It's becoming a little bit more mainstream, which I'm very glad to see, that the legacy of racist housing policies play so much more of a role in our current conditions than anyone has ever imagined. I mean, housing is at the forefront of so many political issues right now, so many social injustices right now. And we are just now breaking the surface to truly understand how this came to be. And it can get a little tiring. It can get a little tiring whenever the focus of a lot of my content is to look at the historical nature of racist housing policies. And I wish I didn't have to do it. I wish I did not have to do it. Unfortunately, it makes up such a prominent part of our current housing situations today that overlooking it would be malfeasance in a way. If you think that you are a housing advocate, which I would like to say that I am, I would like to assume that I can call myself that without any pushback. You can't not talk about it.